4545 League, and this game between Paul-Romero and I'm Great was played in Team Event 60 in the second round and was selected as Game of the Week. Let's have a look. Okay, so far pretty straightforward book variation. E5 isn't the most common move of the Queen's Gambit accepted, but suffice it to say that it's going to lead to an even game. And here we get this strategic imbalance early that White has an isolated queen pawn. Now the isolated queen pawn can be a strength or a weakness. It can be a weakness as pieces are traded off. Then it'll be a target. It can be a strength because for the moment White's controlling a couple of center squares and he has free development around that isolated pawn. So let's take a look and see what happens. Okay, bishop d6. Not exactly sure where theory ends on this. It seems generally you should be developing knights before bishops. But white develops and black develops. And here White makes what I consider to be a poor choice, h3. Okay, I see this move a lot, and what's funny is Black immediately comes and plays h6, which actually may be a good move, and we'll see why in a moment. And it'll become even more apparent as time goes on. But you know, my first inclination is neither side should play this, but it turns out Black's is better than White's. Black's rook pawn thrust is better. I see this in a lot of low-rated games. I teach chess to all rating levels, and I run into a lot of players that their opponents are running up both rook pawns to keep bishops and knights out of these squares. Okay, that's their idea. And what I tell them, they do this in the opening, what I tell my students is you've got to break the position open when you're ahead in development. And what happens when they don't, and I really had to work with a few of them, it would turn out those rook pawn moves would become strong because they weren't breaking the position open, and then they were depriving them of squares they could get to when the position remained closed, and then eventually they would find themselves outplayed. So let's ask ourselves, what is Black going to put on g4? Is he going to put a knight there? Probably not. It's too early, and you know, there's not going to be a quick checkmate on h2. You see this at the beginner level. Is Black going to put a bishop there? Well, maybe. That attacks a knight, right? And it might lead to some kind of tactic where Black can take on f3, and when the queen takes back, this pawn is unprotected. But I'm thinking White has much better moves here. Here's what I think is probably better for White: bishop g5, and it follows the principle that you want to develop your pieces. And since Black is going to be playing h6 move, let's go ahead and play it. Now, what can Black do? He's got this pin to deal with. There's no tactic here with. Well, let's see. Trying to set up a tactic here. The idea is. Let's see if this works. Let's burn a move. Okay, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do some kind of tactic where we can win this critter. No, we can't do it. You know, I'm trying to do this check and take the bishop, but the queen's on the square. So Black basically has no threat. So bishop g5. If Black plays h6 and g5, I mean, he's exposing his entire king side. And White shouldn't have anything to worry about in this position. Okay, so if Black plays here, you know, White should just continue his development. Like I say, you know, I burned a move last time. Let's just develop. And you know, White's got all four minors out. The queen's ready to step off the back rank in a moment, and you know, there's an annoying pin. If you really don't like that pin so much, you know, you can kick him out. Let's see, whose move is it? It's Black's move. Let's develop a knight. Let's kick that and see what happens. Okay, now does White want to try this? You know, exposes kingside. Well, you know, looks like, let's see, can white do this? He's probably going to drop a pawn, it seems. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. You don't get anything for it. But white's broken the pin, and everything should be fine. You know, it's a little risky to do this, but white's getting his pieces out. The other plan that white has is just let that thing is advance this pawn to d5. See, one of the methods, the method to play against the isolated queen pawn is first you want to restrain it, and what I mean by restraining it is keep it advancing to d5, because that pawn can be very strong on d5. Yeah, it cuts off this diagonal for the bishop, but it opens up a new square that white can now access. So black's goal is to restrain it first. Then black's strategy is to blockade it, and when it's on d4, and then eventually you destroy it. It becomes a weakness, a target, and you eventually win this pawn. So that's basically the black strategy. So white's free to advance that pawn. I mean, I learned this back when I was rated 1500. I was playing a future master who was very strong, one of the best chess teachers in America. GM Larry Christensen was among the students. And I played black in a French defense. He played the exchange variation and followed with c4, and he got the isolated pawn, but he knew how to play the position, and he did get it to d5, and I managed to achieve a drawable position, but I had the slight worse of it and slipped up. But it wasn't easy for black, and d5 really makes the game not easy for black, I think. If black ever returns, tries to not return, try to let white liquidate the isolated pawn, then the advantage that black had is gone. So black hasn't really played necessarily to prevent that isolated queen pawn from advancing. Black should have maybe, instead of, well, let's see, can he get a, white's threatening a check. I'm wondering if he can get away with c6. You know, that's one thing I don't like about bishop d6. Let's back it up slightly. Oh, here, let me just go forward a second and I'll explain. See, I'd like to play c6 here, but there's a nuisance check here, right? Okay, so maybe this bishop was better off on e7, and that in turn will prevent a potential pin. Now, can white play d5 here? Well, I suppose he could, but you know, black's gonna, let's look at it this way. Knight out. Now there's two attackers, two defenders. White will bring another defender. Black's getting castled. White better castle here. You know, well, white's got it advanced. Black can probably equalize with c6, and if white liquidates, we've got a very level symmetrical type game. But white's objective is to play for a win, not to play for a draw. So you gotta get d5 in at the right time. Let's go forward since we're in the wrong position. And you know, h3 just doesn't seem to fit. You know, this entire queen side is undeveloped, and look, so is black's. But white's sitting there saying, I'm going to play with a weakness, and now he develops. He's not even trying to do d5, and here's a chance to do it. He develops the queen, and that takes away a diagonal from black's bishop. See, this bishop can't get to f5. But one problem with why this h6 is kind of a thorn in white's side is where does he develop this bishop to? You know, g5 is taken, f4 is covered, e3 it becomes a tall pawn, and d2 it doesn't really have activity. See, one of the ideas when you play with the isolated queen pawn and keep it on d4 is this bishop on c4 has a great deal of activity around it, and the bishop on c1 is kind of in the way. Let's see what happens. I think, you know, usually they say don't put knights on the rim, but black comes up with a great strategy here, and we'll see it. And here maybe white should have considered b3. The reason is take c4 away from white. We got to play for squares. You're not fighting over combinations and pieces. You're fighting over squares. Because watch what happens. White develops his bishop, and then black makes a good move. Black is eliminating the good bishop that white had. And white's got absolutely nothing to show for it. He's got reasonable development, but his best piece is gone. And as I was saying earlier, the more pieces that come off the board, the weaker this isolated queen pawn becomes. And he still hasn't tried to advance it to d4. I'm sorry, to d5. And here's another chance to advance it. Well, let's see, maybe not. Let's see. Let's look at it. Okay, the knight can go here. Now you're on it twice, so the queen has to maybe come up here. Uh-oh, there's a fork. Yeah, that refutes it. So let's see. Queen d4 meets the same fate. Going to drop that pawn. Okay, so white can't advance it. He's missed his chance to advance it, so maybe he needs to make a preparation move. And I'm kind of against that move. It's again, these rook pawn moves are meant to keep pieces out of these squares. He doesn't want his queen templed. Well, there's two ways to deal with that. Number one, develop the rook. Let him play here. If he's going to play there, he's going to play there, right? And now you've got a place to tuck the queen. And if you really need to, you can drive that out. But here, black is eyeballing setting up the blockade. So black's going to get that no matter what. So in my mind, white just lost a tempo here with a3. And now black moves his knight. And now here white goes on a couple of errant strategies. See, he's out looking for the bishop. There's a lot of people that value bishops over knights and will just go to any extreme to trade their knights off for bishops. It's a good bishop for black since a great number of white pawns are on dark squares. But it's costing white 2 tempos to take it. Plus, it's going to develop a black piece when he does take it. Meanwhile, this rook stays undeveloped. Okay? So black just gets his blockade he wanted. And, it's written by Aaron Nimzovich. Don't make exchanges that develop your opponent's pieces or improve their squares. Make exchanges that develop your pieces if you can. So here, white's just developing the black queen. Well, thank you very much. Okay, and attrition, another piece down. The isolated queen pawn becomes weaker. White has virtually no winning chances here. We've played 17 moves, and it's going to take a blunder by black for white to get any kind of play. Simply because strategically white's got the worst of it. His light squared bishops disappeared, which he needed to surround the pawn. He's lost any opportunity to push d5. Black's achieved the first two aims. Restrain, blockade, and then all that leaves is destroy. So now this is kind of a peculiar move. Maybe it's overprotecting weakness, but there was an open file here. How many players would just naturally put this rook on c1? Well, anyway, he didn't. Okay. Now white attacks the pawn, and black decides he'll go ahead and let him have it. Queen takes can be met by rook here, queen here, and rook takes, and suddenly black's on the 7th rank. So now the white covers d4 a little bit, but you look at this wonderful bishop he has. See, he probably should have tried to trade his bishop off for that bishop, not the knight for the bishop. Now this bishop just becomes a tall pawn. And black decides that he doesn't want to give up that pawn after all. And this actually seems like a good move. White has built up to secure the e5 square. Black is not earmarked on d4 just yet. With the way the lineup is, if this knight were missing, you couldn't take the pawn because the more valuable queen stands in the way of the rook, so black can't retake on d4. but black develops a piece. And I think it's here where white commits that other mistake. Yeah, here it is. This is a serious error. It follows the same rule I gave before. Don't make exchanges that develop your opponent's pieces. Okay? Just leave the knight there. The worst that's going to happen, let's see, how do we improve the white position? That's a good question. Let's just try this move. Okay? We're just testing a move, okay? Now knight takes, okay, pawn takes. I'm on the queen, right? And the queen has to move. So let's do it a little differently. Let's try to take this off. Now suppose I take with the queen to avoid, well, let's see. Oh, we had got to take with the pawn, I think. Let's see. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Knight. Does this hang d4? Well, it runs into a pin. Knight takes. Seems like white has lost a pawn here. Okay, let's be careful. Let's be a little more careful. Okay, queen c4 may not be a good move. We want to be able to take with the pawn. Kind of hard to find a waiting move here. Let's try rook d2. That way it doesn't. There's not a rook tempoed. Okay, now if knight takes, pawn takes. Well, we got a problem on d2. Okay. Let's see, knight takes is going to win a rook. Okay, so rook d2 doesn't work. Okay, what does white do here? Let's try queen a2. Okay, now let's suppose knight takes, pawn takes, knight takes. Now you're going to lose 2 rooks for the queen. Let's see. Does black want to do this? Come on, take king up and win that pawn. Looks like black's come out okay on this. White has some weak pawns, but you know he's got the queen. He can make a nuisance value of himself. But I think black's better here. So another idea is just bring the knight back. You know, I was trying to find a position where white could put the knight here and let black take, but it just seems to run into some problems. Let's see. Let's try this. Let's get the rook where it wanted to. Should have gone. Okay, now we've broken the pins on the d file. Now let's see. Black liquidates here. White takes here. Now knight takes, pawn takes. You're going to lose a pawn again. And I don't think white has anything. So with that in mind, what if white just brings the knight? Whoops, got to put the rook back. Go back one more. Okay, now bring the knight back here. Now the question is, can black get anywhere here? d4 is well covered. 2 minor pieces are covering it. This seems to be the move. Most likely seems to be the move. But, you know, white virtually has no winning chances, but he shouldn't be in trouble here. But watch what happens as a result of this move. You know, he's made 2 moves in succession with this knight and then traded it off. And again, it's improving the position of the black pieces, because now black wants to play knight f4 with a mate threat to follow. So this causes white to stop and weaken his position a little further. Now the f3 square is not covered. h3 is not covered, and now we'll see why this pawn to h3 hurts white in just a moment. And white goes about his business trading pieces every chance he can. He trades a piece. But now he has to stop and cover h3. He didn't have time for rook e1. You know, normally you'd like to play rook e1 and seize the open file here, but you can't, because you know this weakness was created, which cost white twice. Number 1, he has to stop and guard it now, but number 2, he didn't get a piece out earlier. So that's why these rook pawn moves are not good. You know, a lot of people do it just to avoid getting back rank mated, but you need to learn how to not get back rank mated. In other words, don't just make a nervous move without analyzing, like, oh, I'll push this pawn just so I don't get back rank mated. Well, you're not a back rank mate, right? Well, just make sure it doesn't happen to you. Okay? But White had to play g3 to keep that knight out. Now Black gains another tempo on this pawn, which is now weakened because the king had to step sideways. Maybe the king should have come up here, but that's kind of like neither here nor there. Now White's just all tied down, and look at this wonderful bishop. It's not doing a thing for White. Now Black takes the open file, and White tries to trade queens, but Black wants no part of that. And at this point, White throws the game away. I'll show you, and Black has a nice finish. Queen d3. It looks like a natural move, but the quiz here is Black to play and do the best he can. Pause the video. How much? Let's go. Well, here. Go ahead. Pause the video, and now you've come back. Let's see how long White took on that move. He took about. His clock went up 28 seconds. He spent 17 seconds. I mean, he's down low on time, and but the move isn't obvious. I hope you found it. Knight e3. This threatens a mate in one. So it's a nice active move that threatens a mate that White didn't anticipate. How do you prevent the mate? Well, you give up your queen for the knight. That's one way. That's probably no good. Or you take it. And now comes this rook down your throat. And how do you guard g3? I don't think you do. Okay, check. Now where do you go? You get to lose your queen here, or your king. You know, it's basically over. So let's go back one move and try to find a defense for White. And I really think Black comes out better here. If Black wants, he can liquidate into what appears to be a winning ending. Okay, take. And now this rook comes on the 7th rank, and Black's tempoing this pawn. So here, got to cover that weakness. And then this pawn runs over here. And sometimes one can draw a rook and pawn ending, a pawn down. If you're going to be a pawn down in the ending, you want it to be a rook and pawn ending. But I don't think White's going to pull this off. I think in the long run, Black will win this. Anyway, a great game by I'm Great. You know, you found the right moves, and you had a better strategy than White did, where White was just sitting there trying to hold on, and eventually his weaknesses in the position caught up to him. And I thank you so much for your time. Take care.